Fantastic. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with our next speaker. Andrée Lévesque is retired from McGill. She's a prolific scholar in social and economic history with a specialization in the Quebec labor movement. And she'll be speaking on Breath, Music and Power, Quebec street protests in our times.
I don't go too much by the title of my talk. I'm not just going to speak about our times because I'm a historian and I'm much more comfortable with the past. But I will start by describing, Montreal has a strong tradition, like every large city, of street protest. I will start by talking about the May Day protest, 1906 and then 1907. And then I will jump to 2012. So we can make some, compare and contrast 100 years apart if you want. There's different kinds of street protests, marches. The ones that people were most familiar with in the 19th century, turn of the 20th century, were strikes, of course. Then they were later on, as we've heard, unemployed protests against conscription, sorry, and celebrations like Labor Days, which is not protest really, in September. But I want to talk about May Day. The context in Montreal at the beginning of the 20th century, there was a socialist presence. There were more than one small socialist, social democratic or workers' party. Workers' party had just been formed to give labor representation in politics. There's no May Day celebration. There seemed to have been one in 1891, but there's nothing 1900 to 1903. On the front page of one of the newspaper, you see a reproduction of a painting before the strike by Munkazi. I don't know if you know him. That's all there is. There's no comments, nothing. Someone obviously working at the newspaper wanted to pass a message on the front page, because this was not just for the aesthetics of a new painting coming out. I mean, but nothing else is said. But every year, this is the time of anarchist direct action in Europe, right? And so every year, there are headlines and there are articles about the terrible things happening, especially in Paris, where you have to call in the army. There are people being killed on the 1st of May regularly. Excuse me. Well, in 1906, you have the front page of the newspapers all about Paris. But if you turn to page 2, you realize that something's been going on in Montreal as well. There was a socialist demonstration, that's how they called it, where people marched. For those who know Montreal and those who don't, it's about 6 long blocks. They walked from the corner of St. Catherine, they walked on St. Catherine near St. Laurent to Saint Denis, and went down Saint Denis to muster, to get together behind City Hall in a place called Champ de Mars. Champ de Mars meaning, Mars being the king of war. It's a military, it's a park, and there's a regiment, there are barracks and a regiment, so they have to negotiate so that the regiment can have their exercises on the park before the people arrive. You see, but all that is negotiated and everything's fine. There's about 500 to 600 people, just not much. The newspaper tells us that the majority were Jews expelled from Russia by the Tsar. There's a lot of police in uniform and what is called them, and I love that, en habit de bourgeois, dressed like bourgeois. So, whereas today you can recognize the police by looking at their shoes, like in Montebello, but they're en habit bourgeois. There's an illustration in the paper, it's quite interesting. I should have a PowerPoint, but I had technical problems, and I figured people of our generation can understand without pictures. But the illustration shows bearded men with hats and skull caps, women, lots of women wearing long dresses and their hat, and children and banners. So people march, unfurl the red flag to the cries of hurry when the red flag comes out. On the flag, on the banner, there's Workers of the World Unite. Speakers include francophones and anglophones, and the main organizer is Albert Saint-Martin. Those of you in Canadian history are probably familiar with the name. Saint-Martin is an interesting character. He moves. He's with the anarchists, he's with the socialists then, he will be close to the CP, in and out of the CP. And here I would like to open a parenthesis and go on a tangent, if you allow me, because yesterday someone posed the question of the Comintern and what might have happened if the Comintern had not, if there was not such a policy of democratic centralism which implemented the Comintern line, which is devised in the Soviet Union, to all the Communist Party everywhere in the world, whether or not it applied. When the party was founded, and you have Zinovьev's conditions, Saint-Martin asked that they be a communist party for Quebec. After all, people speak French there, or the majority, and so on. And he was refused. And there was no concession made for Quebec, no special section. Montreal was district number 2 of the Communist Party, but another part of Quebec in the northwest was in another district together that overlapped with Ontario. So I'll finish my tangent. Back to the demonstration, there was an Italian band, people sang the Internationale. The crowd grows, there's over 1,000 people by the time they walk in front of Laval University. Laval University was a Catholic university, so in front of it, everybody screams, shouts, "À bas la calotte." A calotte is what the priest, it's like a yarmulke, but for priests, okay? So the students respond by their music singing La Marseillaise. There's no physical clash then between the students and the demonstrators. Saint-Martin speaks in French, in English, and in Esperanto, because he's a campaigner for Esperanto, like a lot of people in the anarchist movement at the time. Young women pass the hat for the Western Miners Federation, and they collect $800, which is a lot of money then. End of 1906. I will not give you every single demonstration between 1970 and 2015, rest assured. But I still, if I have time. Although there was no clash, and there was no violence in 1906, 1907, Saint-Martin has to go see the mayor and assure him that blood will not be spilled. Who thought there would be? I don't know. The unions refused to join the socialists, the international unions, so they stay out of it. Of course, they recognize September Labor Day, not May Day. The headline of the newspaper that comes out before the demonstration or the march is in the evening, the headline says, "We are expecting serious trouble. The riot tag will be red." There's no indication that. So 200 to 300 people meet in a labor hall on St. Catherine, and they are forbidden to march from A to B, like they did the preceding year. So they call some fiacres, you know, those horse and carriage, each holding 4 people. So you have, 20 of them arriving. You bring up more policemen en habits de bourgeois and in their uniforms. And people get in the horse and buggies. Now the crowd is thousands around them, apparently. Probably mainly supporters and curious people. And they go in their horses there. But a woman unfurls a red flag from the buggy, or fiacre. What's a fiacre in English? yeah, it's a, well, not a drum, whatever.
A horse-drawn cab.
It's a cab, that's the word I was looking for. And immediately the red flag is seized, and that happens 3 times. Each time the red flag comes out, they seize it. There's another banner with equality, fraternity, and liberty that the police seize, breaks the stick, puts it in his pocket. Anyway. Then the account gets sort of confused. Some members of the crowds apparently attacked the socialists, and you could hear cries of kill them, kill them. We're not sure from where. There was a scuffle. This is before they reached the Champ de Mars. As they're getting into their cab, 4x4, there's some arrests, and finally they could leave, and finally the 65th Regiment, who like the preceding year has permission to have their exercises before the other ones arrive. This is okay. Again, by then, the crowd is 6,000 people, or 5 to 6. This is a lot at the time, and it will grow because by the end they will say 8,000. Now I don't know if there's an exaggeration, and if there is, it is not to show that there's a socialist menace. It is to show what every newspaper says, that the police did such an excellent work that despite having so many thousand people, they could maintain order. Again, there would be clashes with the students when one side sings the Internationale, the other one sings La Marseillaise, or even Au Canada. They're different speakers. I don't know if you know them, but I couldn't find a German socialist called Rach, R-A-C-H, and then a fellow called Maklansky, who is said to have been a candidate at the Illinois elections of 1904 for governorship, but I never found that certified, so whatever it is. And the newspaper will say once again, in the crowd we notice many Israelites. There again, the unions were not there, had kept their distances. There had been some arrests. And that's the end of the demonstrations. The Riot Act was not read, there was no blood spilled. There's the end of the demonstrations until, well, there's a little one in 1908, but nothing till the war. And then all the others, you know, I'm sure you know, you know, I'm not going to talk about the riots or the protest against conscription, for instance, so on. The CP is founded in 1921, and as I said, it is one centralized party, notwithstanding the fact that Earl Browder said that French Canadians were the weakest link in the chain of capitalism in Canada, and compared them to the blacks. He did not say white niggers of America, quote, but okay. I will skip, and go to 2012. We shouldn't forget what happened in 2011, you know, this is history, but there's the Occupy movement in 2011. And what happens in 2012 comes after that, and is, you know, in Occupy in Montreal, people occupied Victoria Square, which they renamed the People's Square. There were about 1,000 people, and it was tolerated. It's October, started getting colder, you know, in the 10s, but it's estimated that about 3,000 people at one time or another camped in Victoria Square. But it's also the place, one of the many places where homeless live in Montreal. And there were inevitable clashes. Some women got harassed, there were problems of alcohol and drugs and whatever. And by the 25th of November, the campers were expelled. It took 3 hours and they were kicked out. There were 8 arrests, which is not very much. Comes the spring of 2012, you probably all heard about, which starts because the state, the government, the liberal government of the time, wants to put up student fees. Now, I know Quebec has the lowest student fees in Canada. Student fees were $2,100. But we have an ideal of free education. Since the 60s, it was in reports on education reform, and this has always been the ideal, is free university. The threat was to put it up to 3,800. The first big demonstration was in March, 22nd of March, and we couldn't believe it because it's a weekday, people are supposed to be working, not student, but it's not just about students, and that's the point I want to make. It's a much broader movement against austerity. The unions aren't there. At the beginning, this is a movement where the unions followed and did not lead. And it took a while before they did. What you find on the street are, of course, the students. Community sector. The community sector in Quebec is very strong. And they're there in force. Political parties, you have Québec Solidaire, which is a party, is the most of the main parties, it's the more to the left of the Social Democratic. It is for, of course, social reform, social and economic reform, so it's a socialist party of sorts, and it is, of course, for Quebec's independence. So they're there, and has two leaders, a man and a woman, who are both members of a legislature, plus a third one. But the 2 points I want to make, because I know time is time. You can ask questions, you want to know more. It's a broader movement, it's not just students. There's a strong police presence, and there's a strong police provocation because there's a presence of the ultra-left. Do you see ultra-left in English?
Yeah.
Okay, the ultra-left is very important in Montreal. Montreal is the most important center of anarchism in North America with San Francisco. We have the Anarchist Book Fair that brings people from all over every year, with not just a book fair, but theater and so on. They're very present. The Black Bloc is there. I'm talking really the left-to-left fringe. There is, and that's what's different if you compare with, I shouldn't say respectable, but demonstrations before, from the beginning of the century till about 20 years ago. There's a deliberate provocation of the police by not giving the itinerary, for instance, as your usual excuse to arrest the usual suspect. But also the question of direct action is very present. 22nd of March, 22nd of April, 22nd of May, and by then, people take to the street every night with pots and pans. In Latin America is the caceroladas. That is, and I have to specify because a lot of people react negatively when I say that because you associate it with the people against Allende who took out the pots and pans. You're associated with the right, but actually in a number of countries, whether it's Turkey or France, Mexico, it has been also an instrument of the left. But if you talk to people today, was the most exhilarating moment. You walk down the street with your pots and pans, I've done it. You have people in cafes who all start banging on their glasses, and people come on their balcony with their pots and pans because they can demonstrate from home. And I just want to close by saying on police action, one policewoman became notorious from one day to the other for spray painting a demonstrator who was about this distance. And it's all caught on video now. Her number is 728. So just go on Google and say YouTube, police 728. And you will see the sequence. And I say that because she just came out with her autobiography. And I heard it on the radio. And of course, she's as self-righteous as ever. There's also, if we want to go on, and I know my time is up, but one effect it had on the younger generation was that old expression consciousness raising. It has politicized so many young people. And some have told me, one young woman told me before going in the street, she didn't even know the name of the prime minister or the premier. I mean, you might say it's pretty dumb, but she became a militant. And Okay, I finished. Okay.